council, mayor, and 2 independent boards, a park board, and a board of estimate and taxation. All told, 22 races are on that ballot. It's a very full ballot. So if it did combine, it would probably take 2 ballot papers without ranked choice voting, let alone with ranked choice voting. The school board election is held in even years along with the city of Minneapolis. In St. Louis Park, the school board is also elected in odd years, along with the city races, correct? Same is true in St. Paul, so that mixed election is happening under ranked choice voting. Mixing ranked choice with other elections is the most common way it's done across the country, so that's not a problem. But Minneapolis has a preference to do that, and if they change and want to ever go to even year, we know that it works in that kind of scenario too.
There's a real good argument in the St. Louis Park video of your study session with the experts for doing the off-year elections. And the best argument I heard was that in those even years, when you're competing against a federal race with the presidential election, it just sucks all the oxygen out of the room for those down ballot races. And that's a good reason to do the odd year elections, is because you don't have to compete with the presidential sort of campaign cycle.
And candidates, once candidates get used to that system, what it means is that they, you're right, they don't have to compete with those campaign staffers and those resources and the media attention and all the rest, and they can compete in another election cycle that's not municipal. So a city council candidate might run in a house race in the next cycle, etc. So they just kind of go through that iteration. But it's a preference, and it's working for the communities where it's working. Any other questions? Are you sure? It's a very, very lively conversation.
Isn't there anyone going to bring up the one person, one vote?
Well, I wanted to come back to that, because that's why St. Paul got delayed and why the council was hesitant to put it on the ballot initially, was because as soon as Minneapolis adopted this, of course, someone sued. It happens everywhere. Every time it starts in a state, it gets challenged legally. Is it really legal? Does it comport with our Constitution? Does it comport with our state law? It gets asked everywhere. It got asked in Minneapolis. And it was a good thing that that happened, because people kept asking it, and it was decisively ruled constitutional by the Minnesota Supreme Court by unanimous vote by Justice, what was his name? A plenty appointee. It'll come back.
Magnuson?
Magnuson, thank you very much. Justice Magnuson. So, and he wrote that opinion. It was unanimously ruled constitutional, and that settled the question on whether or not this was a system that was supported in Minnesota law. The League of Women Voters knew that when they did that study back in 2004, but someone had to double prove it in the courts, and we did that. So it's settled in Minnesota, and that's where that it happened in Santa Fe. Someone wanted to challenge it in Santa Fe. It was dismissed, and Santa Fe went ahead and did their election very successfully last week.
In the same line, you could end up with a Democrat and a Republican in governor or lieutenant governor, correct?
Under ranked choice voting?
Under ranked choice voting, could you end? You're not declaring parties.
Okay. Good question, perhaps, to kind of finalize this with. We've had a conversation tonight about how ranked choice voting works in local races in a nonpartisan context. It changes when you get to state partisan. So Maine, that's going to be using it in their state partisan elections, actually is using ranked choice in the state partisan primary and then again in the state general election. When using it in a primary, when you have multiple candidates, you make sure within the party the candidate emerges with a majority of votes in that race. And then on the general election ballot, you have all the parties represented, and you use it again, to rank your ballot and make sure that whoever prevails with a majority of the vote. So that's how it would work in a state partisan context. Some states, like California, have already gone to a nonpartisan primary. So it could work similar to the way it does for nonpartisan races, where the candidates are on the ballot in November, and then and not decided by party. So it could work either way. Minnesota, when it gets to that stage of having a conversation about this for state elections, would be able to consider what kind of system it would best like in that way. But Maine is starting it, and I'm looking forward to seeing that process play out and providing some lessons for all of us where there might be some interest to use this at a state level. So, Ray?
I was just going to remind you, there's some states that are actually going to a party designation primary winner-take-all race where you can have 2 Democrats or 2 Republicans then contending in the general election for governor or whatever. So there are all sorts of ways that this can be sliced and diced.
It's true. And the opinion of Fair Vote Minnesota is that wherever you have an opportunity to use ranked choice voting, ensure candidates prevail with a majority of the vote, that's more representative and inclusive in a democracy. So thank you all very much. I will
Yes,
let the legal
thank you. Thank you, Deb, for traveling down to Rochester, all the way down to Rochester to share information. Thank you in our community. It is always so rewarding to see folks coming out in the evenings to be more informed and more engaged in what's happening in our community. So thank you to all of you. Invite you to visit. There's 2 options for next Tuesday. Remember, you can go to UMR at 7 p.m. about renewable energy, or you can join us out at the Heinz Center at 6:30 to talk to your city council folks there as well. So we look forward to seeing you in the future. You can find more information about the League's programs and activities on our Facebook page. And everyone have a great night. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.